It's me, Ash, and I'm back for another video. And if you're wondering why there's like barely anything behind me, it's because we are in the process of moving house and I may seem a little tired and stressed out, but it's okay. And I want to bring you a video for this week and a video along with this week's blog post. So if you're unaware, I'm just kind of experimenting with YouTube, seeing what happens, but I do run a blog that I think is kind of good. And every Friday I write a blog post with the theme of Freaky Friday Files. And we go over things like unsolved mysteries, cults, serial killers, anything with a little bit of freakiness in it or creepiness. And I really enjoy doing this. And so I thought, why not give myself more work and add a video to the mix as well. So let's get into today's video. Also, quick side note before we start, I just had some soft drink and some chips because it's like the evening, I'm hungry, Luke's at cricket, I've got to wait till he gets home before we can have dinner. First world problems, I know, I have a very lovely life and things are good. But if I look not my best, that's why. It's also been a very long day and I didn't sleep last month. And I didn't sleep very well last night, so I don't even have a coffee right now because it's so late in the day and I do want to get some sleep tonight. But yeah, that's just a little bit about what's going on. Oh, and I did get my hair done in the weekend and then it rained and I went outside and so it's starting to go a little bit curly again and I am just going off into a complaint zone. Today's video is going to be about the Circleville Letters. Now, if you're like me and have an interest in shows like Gossip Girl, Pretty Little Liars, Riverdale, anything like that, this video is for you. Now, I watched Pretty Little Liars and Riverdale pretty much as soon as they came out. Very odd endings, very strange things happening. But Gossip Girl is older and I was a bit late to the party with that. I didn't watch it until the first lockdown of COVID back in New Zealand and I was hooked. So if you've ever seen Gossip Girl, the premise of it is that there's a blogger known as Gossip Girl. There's these upper class rich teenagers who go to a fancy school, like a private school, and their lives are really privileged. And this blogger, Gossip Girl, writes about their lives, tells everyone their secrets, all of those things. And the Circleville Letters are like an analog version of Gossip Girl. And when I tell you there is some drama, there is some tea, there is definitely both of those things in this case. And to this day, it still remains unsolved. Alright, so I've got my laptop. Here's my blog draft before it's published. Do you feel good? Although this will probably be published when this video goes out. Let's take a look at what this unsolved mystery was about. But first, I want to set the scene. It's the 1970s in Circleville, Ohio, United States. A small town, an eerie small town with strange occurrences that happened all the time. Circleville is a town of quiet isolation and secrets hidden behind the picket fences of suburbia. At night, quaint houses appear frozen in time, with a peculiar stillness about. The stillness danced in the moonlight, and then with that comes unsettling unease. Residents speak in hushed tones, gossip goes all over the town, and everyone shares a sense of quiet unease. Now that we've taken ourselves into the scene in Ohio, it's 1976. Residents started to receive mysterious letters about their personal lives, specifically about their sex lives, about affairs they might have been having. They were also kind of threatening. It was the analog version of Gossip Girl terrorizing the small town of Circleville in Ohio. The letters were marked as if they came from Columbus, Ohio, another town in Ohio. We really don't know who was behind these letters, and we'll go over some theories today. We're going to start with Mary Gillespie. I'm not sure how to say that. I'm sorry if it's wrong. Now, Mary was a devoted wife. She had some children. She was a great friend. People always described her as lovely, caring, all of those stereotypical woman traits. Mary was a bus driver for a school, and she was the person who received the very first letter from the Circleville letter writer. Mary was accused of having an affair with the superintendent, Gordon Massey, from a school. However, Mary disregarded these claims, saying that it wasn't true, she would never do that. But more letters kept coming to her, and the writer claimed that he was watching, and the letters got more threatening and even more cruel as time went on. In one of the letters to Mary, the writer wrote that she needed to stop this affair or else, basically. And then one day her husband Ron even started getting letters from this mysterious anonymous letter writer. In the letter to Ron, the writer revealed that Mary would be in danger if she didn't reveal her affair to the school board or stop her affair with Gordon Massey himself. He also then threatened Ron's life, so this is Mary's husband, threatened his life if Mary didn't confess to her sins. And he even went to go so far that he was going to broadcast on CB radio, like between the buses and trucks, on signs, billboards, anything he could, broadcast the affair until the truth came out. Mary had her own suspicions of who this mysterious writer guy or girl was. Her first instinct was that a fellow bus driver named David Longberry was at fault or was writing these letters because he had made a pass at her, a romantic pass previously, and Mary had rejected David because she wasn't interested. And allegedly David had always been resentful towards Mary because of this. So no one else really knew about the letters that Mary and Ron was receiving until one day they decided to ask Ron's sister specifically for help. And at the time, she was the only other person that knew about these letters. And then eventually, Ron's sister Karen and her husband Paul now knew about the letters, and they were going to help them out with fighting back, I guess. The four of them decided that they were all going to write a letter back to David Longberry, who was the prime suspect, and kind of threaten him back and see what happens. So they did this, and I think the letter came from Paul's perspective, so that is Karen's husband, and he's a very important contender in this mystery. The letters stopped, at least for a while anyway, but what was to come next is so sinister. The phone call that changed it all. On August 19th, 1977, so probably like a year later, Ron, Mary's husband, received a phone call that made him really angry and upset. Mary and Ron had a good life, they had great children. The phone call made Ron really upset. He grabbed his gun and told his children he was going to go talk to the man that was sending these letters. I think the children must have known about this. I'm not too sure. There's not a lot of information about the children. A few hours later, Ron's truck was found. He had crashed into a tree and he did not survive. They had noticed that Ron had fired his gun prior to crashing into the tree. And the police, specifically Sheriff Dwight Radcliffe, ruled the death a result of a drunk driving incident because in the autopsy it had shown that Ron had over the legal drinking blood alcohol levels. And another thing that happened was the sheriff interviewed someone else allegedly involved in this accident, but there's not a lot of information, so it's kind of confusing. So this other suspect or person or witness or whatever who was also involved took a polygraph, so like a lie detector test, passed with flying colours, and then Ron had alcohol in his system, so the death was ruled drunk driving incident. Kind of makes sense, kind of doesn't, but we'll get to that. Following Ron's death, more letters came. There was one that circulated Circleville about the sheriff. The letter claimed that the sheriff was involved in a cover-up of Ron's death. However, the sheriff did mention once that he was kind of suspect of foul play for Ron's death, but he ruled it out after seeing the autopsy results. Ron's family and his friends said that he barely ever touched alcohol and that he hadn't had a drop of it when he'd left the house. So why was he suddenly drinking? Did someone try and poison him? I don't know. And the truth finally comes out. After a while following Ron's death, Mary revealed that she had in fact been having an affair with Gordon, but she said that she started the affair prior to Ron's death, but after the letters had started, and allegedly they have been brought together by the trauma of all of this happening. Now, I don't know if I really buy this, but it is a convenient time to say, oh yeah, we were having an affair when your husband dies, so And then after this occurred, letters to Mary became even worse. In February 1983, so a while now, whoever was behind writing these letters went to extreme lengths to expose Mary's affair. There were obnoxious signs along her bus route that she drove, and on these signs was something unimaginable that any parent wouldn't want to see. There was an accusation of Gordon, her alleged lover, turned real lover, abused her 12-year-old daughter, and in ways that I cannot mention on YouTube. One day, Mary saw the sign. I don't think she'd seen it before. She immediately stopped the bus. She decided she wanted to tear that sign down, and I don't blame her. Any mother would do that. But this was bad luck for Mary because the sign happened to be booby-trapped. Police found a gun in the booby trap, and the sign was registered to Paul. That is Ron's sister's husband. Paul told the cops that the gun had been stolen and he'd just forgotten to report it. Very convenient. Paul was then asked if he could perform some handwriting tasks to compare it to these anonymous letters that Circleville was receiving, that Circleville residents were receiving. And so Paul complied, but it wasn't your normal handwriting matching test. I don't know the real word for that. But what they got Paul to do is they gave him the anonymous letter, word for word, not a copy of it, and asked him to reproduce it. Now, normally when they do these handwriting tasks, you would just be given the words of the letter in either someone else's handwriting or it would be typed up. But for this one specifically, he was given the actual letter, which is very odd. Somehow, the circumstantial evidence, because people said that the handwriting matched, meant that Paul was, 1, the Circleville letter writer, and 2, the person who tried to murder Mary. A handwriting expert testified for this as well. Paul was found guilty and he served 10 years in jail. Paul and Karen got a divorce because of this, and their divorce was very messy. It even led Karen to believe that Paul was the one that did this. Paul was also found guilty of attempted murder because of the booby trap. And a lot of people did believe the guilty verdict. but it wasn't all that it seemed. While Paul was in prison, more letters went out, and they only got worse and more threatening as time went on. Did they have the wrong guy? What on earth was going on here? Paul even received his own letters in prison, with one of them saying, "Now, when are you going to believe you aren't going to get out of there? I told you 2 years ago, when we set him up, they stay set up. Don't you listen at all?" And I mean, I'm no expert on criminals or criminal profiling or anything like that, but to me, it sounds like Paul had found out who the writer was. He might have been threatened. Paul might have been part of multiple writers. Maybe the writer had more dirt on Paul than we realized. And so they were kind of curious to see whether the letters would still occur if they put Paul into solitary confinement. So that's like a dark room with no access to anything. They put him in there as kind of like a test, which is really awful. So he had no access to mail. He couldn't send or receive mail. But the letters still kept coming. People still seem to believe that Paul did this. Paul was released out of prison in 1994 with parole. To this day, and up until his death, Paul maintained his innocence. He even started his own blog about his innocence. This mystery even became featured on one episode of Unsolved Mysteries. And what's creepy about this is before the episode aired, the producers received a letter. And this letter was obviously from the Circleville letter writer, or maybe a copycat. But this letter wrote, "Forget Circleville, Ohio. Do nothing to hurt Sheriff Radcliffe. If you come to Ohio, you L-stickos will pay the Circleville writer." The production team were undeterred by this, and they went on with broadcasting the show anyway. They even interviewed Paul for a segment. I'm still not convinced whether this was actually the Circleville writer or if it was a copycat or someone just trying to mess with them to scare them. But after 1994, no more letters were sent. A lot more people got scary letters like this, or threatening letters, whatever you want to call them, from the Circleville letter writer. They need to come up with a better name for that. That is such a hard thing to say. This Circleville letter writer. I'm scared like sometimes I'm going to say Centerville instead of Circleville because it just sounds more natural. But I did find some interesting tidbits in researching this stuff, and I want to share them with you. There was a rumor that Paul's prosecutor had an affair with a pregnant woman and then murdered her. His name was Roger Klein. Apparently the affair was true according to a couple that went on TV in 2013, but it wasn't true that he murdered her. I don't even know if she was real, to be honest. The person who did Ron's autopsy, Dr. Ray Carroll, was outed by the anonymous writer, and he was convicted of 12 counts of abuse in 1993. Paul ran a website until he passed in 2012, maintaining his innocence, although his writing is very odd. David Longberry, who was an original suspect by Mary, was accused and convicted of assaulting a 12-year-old girl in 1999. Following this, he became a fugitive and he eventually died. I will let you figure out how he died because I can't say that word. And the most interesting tidbit about this is during Paul's sentence, another bus driver, I think it was a woman, came forward saying they saw someone in front of the booby trap sign about 20 minutes before Mary arrived there. The person was described as a large man with sandy hair, and he was in an El Camino car. When the bus driver passed, he turned his head so that they couldn't see who he was. Paul had dark hair and was short, so he was ruled out at this time. But Karen, his ex-wife, was now dating someone who matched this description, and her brother drives an El Camino. But the cops didn't bother looking into this tip. But just imagine if this ran that deep. Potential theories. So if it's not Paul, but we also still have to consider that it could have been Paul or multiple people, who are some other suspects? What are some other theories about this case? So people say Paul still did it, but I'm not specifically convinced. I think if he was involved, there would have been multiple people writing these letters. But it was very strange because they knew intimate personal details about who they were writing to. And they eventually got sent all over Ohio, so there would have to be so many people who kept this secret and no one ever came forward. I just don't buy that. And then, why was he convicted for the booby trap thing and the letters? Like, it's correlation, not causation. You need to map it out as to why. People think that Mary did it herself, or that she was in on it, because allegedly she knew exactly where the sign was and she knew how to avoid getting killed from a sign, and the fact that the affair was actually true. Although I don't think it's that likely considering what was written on the sign about her own daughter. David Longberry, the one whom Mary originally suspected. It could have been him. And then there's Karen. So this was Paul's ex-wife and Ron's sister, and she had plenty of motive. Her divorce with Paul was messy. She could have easily had access to his guns and set him up. Now this one is interesting. It could have been William Massey. Now this is Gordon's son. I don't know how old he was at the time, but Gordon had a son. And the only reason that people suspected William is because some of the letters written to Mary were signed off with the letter W. William passed away in 2023 at only 66 years of age. Another theory is the El Camino man, the guy with the sandy hair who was seen by a bus driver. The police didn't look into him, so I don't really know. Another suspect is Gordon Massey himself. So Mary's affair guy. I don't know what they're called. I'm missing a word. But the reason that he is interesting is online you can find so much information about Mary, about Ron, about Paul and Karen, but you can't find much about Gordon himself. So that makes me suspicious. And one last theory is that someone else altogether did it. It was none of them. But I can't help but still think it was more than one person. And particularly not like a whole group of people, but maybe like 3 people, enough that they would still keep it a secret. Oh, and one more thing. In 2021, they believed that they had identified the anonymous letter writer. An episode of 48 Hours aired where they got in 2 experts, so 2 like document writing experts, I can't say that word, experts, to analyze in a forensic way Paul's handwriting and the anonymous letter handwriting. No one else's handwriting. Why would you not get another sample? So, one expert said it was definitely Paul, and another expert said there's not enough evidence to say it was Paul. There were some links found between Paul's handwriting and the anonymous letter's handwriting, and there were over 100 patterns that did not match, but there were a lot of quirks that did match. So expert 1 was like, yep, he did it. But expert 2 disagreed with this and again said it was circumstantial and that people can have similar handwriting like this. And she also pointed out the fact that letters were still sent out while Paul was in solitary confinement. So someone else could have been doing it. There's also the theory that maybe Paul was doing it at the start and then someone continued his legacy, or whoever was doing it continued. So what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. I hope that wasn't awful. You can probably tell I'm really tired. So maybe I'll watch that back and see how I go. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. Please subscribe to the channel. It will mean the world to me, especially because I'm quite a tiny channel at the moment and I just want to be here and create content. Stay safe. I'm Ash. Bye.